There is a city in California that is not Los Angeles and not San Francisco. Sacramento, the state capital. Population 530,000. Sitting at the confluence of the Sacramento and American rivers in the center of the most productive agricultural valley in the world, 90 miles from the Sierra Nevada, where gold was discovered in 1848, and 90 miles from the Pacific coast where the oysters came from. Sacramento, where the gold rush fed California and California's fields fed the world. 10 dishes this city and its valley don't just make, they own. It is 1849. The town is called Hangtown, named for the three desperados recently hanged from a white oak tree on Main Street. It will later be renamed Placerville, 45 miles east of Sacramento in the Sierra Nevada foothills. But in 1849, it is Hangtown, and it is the supply base for the mining region that has just turned the world upside down. A prospector rushes into the saloon of the El Dorado Hotel. He has just struck gold on the banks of Hangtown Creek. He has a pouch full of gold dust and an empty stomach and one request: give me the most expensive meal you can make. The bartender and cook thought about it. The most expensive things on the menu were eggs, bacon, and oysters. Eggs had to be carefully packed to survive the rough mountain roads from the coast. Bacon came by ship around Cape Horn from the eastern United States. Oysters were packed in barrels of ice and hauled 100 miles by horseback from San Francisco Bay. A single oyster cost $1. The whole meal cost $6, a fortune in 1849 worth roughly $250 today. The prospector said, "Give me all of them." The cook fried the oysters in breadcrumbs, scrambled the eggs with the bacon, combined everything in a skillet. The Hangtown Fry was born. The dish swept up and down the California coast and north to Seattle. Ordering a Hangtown Fry became a mark of prosperity, the status symbol of the gold rush, the meal that announced you had made it. San Francisco's Tadich Grill, which opened as a coffee tent on the wharf in 1849, has been serving the Hangtown Fry continuously for over 175 years. In the 1860s, the Sacramento River was one of the most productive salmon rivers in the world. Chinook salmon ran up the Sacramento in numbers that modern Californians can barely imagine. The Chinese immigrant community that had come to California for the gold rush and stayed to build the transcontinental railroad found in the Sacramento River salmon industry a new opportunity. Chinese entrepreneurs built canneries along the Sacramento River in the 1860s and 1870s, developing the technology and the labor systems that made canned salmon commercially viable. By the 1880s, the Sacramento Valley canneries were shipping canned salmon across the country and around the world. The Chinese cannery workers developed the techniques that made the industry possible: the precise knife work for cleaning and packing fish, the tin soldering techniques for sealing cans, the processing systems that allowed a highly perishable product to be preserved and shipped safely. The industry that fed America its first commercially available canned fish was built by Chinese immigrants in Sacramento who were barred by California law from owning land, from becoming citizens, and from testifying in court against white defendants. The Sacramento River salmon runs collapsed in the 20th century. The canneries are gone. The Sacramento Valley produces approximately 95% of all processed tomatoes grown in the United States. The tomatoes that go into your marinara sauce, your canned diced tomatoes, your ketchup, your pizza sauce, most of them were grown within 100 miles of Sacramento. California's processing tomato industry developed in the Sacramento Valley in the late 19th century, building on the same canning infrastructure developed for salmon. By the early 20th century, Sacramento had become the canning capital of the American West, processing not just tomatoes but the full range of Central Valley produce. The scale is extraordinary. During tomato harvest season, July through October, the highways around Sacramento are lined with trucks carrying tomatoes from field to cannery. The red fruit piled high in open containers, the smell of ripe tomato drifting for miles. The valley that the gold rush miners passed through on their way to the Sierra Nevada became the food processing center of the entire American West. A clingstone peach is a peach whose flesh clings tightly to the pit. Freestone peaches are better for fresh eating. Clingstone peaches are better for canning. The firm, dense flesh holds its texture through the canning process and produces a peach that tastes like summer, regardless of when you open the can. The Sacramento Valley became the center of clingstone peach production in America in the late 19th century. The hot summers, cold winters for dormancy, and rich valley soil produced clingstone peaches of exceptional quality. The Sacramento Valley canned peach was on every Depression-era table, in every World War II care package, in every school cafeteria lunch tray. The industry has declined as fresh fruit distribution improved and consumer preferences shifted. But the orchards remain, and the tradition of the Sacramento Valley clingstone remains the standard against which canned peaches are measured. The Sacramento Valley produces approximately 80% of the world's almonds, not 80% of American almonds. 80% of all almonds grown on Earth. Every almond in every bag of mixed nuts, every almond milk carton, every almond butter jar, 4 out of 5 of them came from the Sacramento Valley. The almond is not native to California. Spanish missionaries planted the first almond trees in California, missions in the 18th century. Commercial almond growing developed in the Sacramento Valley in the late 19th century after farmers discovered that the valley's Mediterranean-like climate was nearly perfect for almond production. Every February, the almond orchards of the Sacramento Valley bloom before anything else in California. Bees come from across the country to pollinate the blossoms. The harvest runs from August through October. The trees are mechanically shaken, each trunk grabbed and vibrated for a few seconds, and the almonds fall to the ground, where they dry before being collected. The Sacramento-San Joaquin River Delta, west of Sacramento where the rivers meet before flowing into San Francisco Bay, sits below sea level, protected by levees, with soil of decomposed tule peat that is among the most fertile in the world. In this unusual landscape, asparagus found its perfect home. Delta asparagus grown in the peat soil is sweeter and more tender than asparagus grown in mineral soil. Chinese farmers dominated Delta asparagus production from the 1870s through the early 20th century, developing the cultivation and harvesting techniques that made the Delta asparagus industry possible. The asparagus was canned in Sacramento canneries and shipped nationally. Stockton called itself the asparagus capital of the world. The Delta Asparagus Festival still runs in Stockton every spring. The peat islands that produced the most celebrated asparagus in America are still farmed, still below sea level, still protected by levees that Chinese laborers also helped build. Japanese immigrants brought rice cultivation to the Sacramento Valley around 1912. They recognized the valley's potential for paddy rice cultivation and developed the infrastructure and techniques that made California rice agriculture viable. The Japanese-American farmers who built the Sacramento Valley rice industry were incarcerated during World War II, their farms seized or lost. When they returned after the war, many had nothing. Some rebuilt. The industry they created survived. California medium-grain rice, sold under brands like Kokuho Rose and Nishiki, is now exported to Japan as a premium product. Japanese consumers pay premium prices for California rice grown in the Sacramento Valley by an industry that Japanese immigrants built and that American incarceration nearly destroyed. In 2012, Sacramento was designated the farm-to-fork capital of America. Within 150 miles of Sacramento, farmers grow almonds, rice, tomatoes, stone fruit, wine grapes, walnuts, pistachios, wheat, corn, asparagus, and dozens of other crops. The Sacramento Farm to Fork Festival closes the Tower Bridge over the Sacramento River every September for a farm-to-table dinner for 800 people, with every ingredient sourced from within a 100-mile radius. The Sacramento Central Farmers Market at Cesar Chavez Plaza is one of the largest year-round farmers markets in California. The farm-to-fork designation is not marketing. It is geography. Sacramento is surrounded by the food it serves. The restaurant that buys local is buying from farms visible from the highway. Sacramento's craft brewing scene is one of the oldest in California. Track 7. Brewing, founded in 2011, became one of the most decorated craft breweries in the state. New Helvetia Brewing, named after the Swiss colony John Sutter, established near Sacramento in 1839, brews since 2014. Rustaller Brewery revived a Sacramento brewing tradition dating to 1881. The Sacramento brewing tradition traces to the gold rush. The miners who arrived in 1849 needed beer, and breweries followed immediately. Steam beer, the style of lager fermented at ale temperatures that became the signature California beer style, was developed in Gold Rush-era California. Anchor Steam in San Francisco is its most famous descendant, but the style originated in the same era that produced the Hangtown Fry. Sacramento has the third largest Vietnamese American community in the United States. The community arrived primarily as refugees after the fall of Saigon in 1975, settling along Stockton Boulevard, which became one of the most significant Vietnamese commercial corridors in California. The po that Sacramento's Vietnamese community has been making since the late 1970s, rich beef broth simmered for hours, served over rice noodles with thin slices of beef, fresh herbs, bean sprouts, and lime, is the po of refugee families who maintained their food culture through displacement and rebuilt it in a new country. Sacramento's Vietnamese restaurants range from family-run PAO shops on Stockton Boulevard, open since the 1980s, to newer establishments run by American-born children of the original refugee generation. The broth recipes adjusted to California beef. The herbs sourced from California farmers who grow Vietnamese varieties for the community. The preparation passing from parents who learned it in Vietnam to children who learned it in Sacramento.